a simply masterful score from the very first of our dotted brev entries from Anna Dieckhoff. I mean, wow, Anna, that was that was amazing. It was just beautifully orchestrated. If I would give you maybe just a little bit of feedback about tempos, there are a few places where you sort of play around with the tempo a bit without actually marking above that you're doing it, and then it happens quite a bit, and it starts to feel a little fussy. So I would say just there's nothing wrong about any of the decisions you made, but if you could just maybe rein some of them in a little bit, just maybe reduce a little bit of the impact. All right, everybody. So look, here is something I've been thinking about for the past couple of months since this started. And I'm thinking to myself that I would like to evaluate just for this set of entries in this particular challenge. I would like to evaluate things backwards a little bit. So basically start with section E and analyze that till the end, and then jump back to section D and analyze that, and then jump back to sections A through C. And my reasons for this are that I think that a couple concerns. One is that I'm worried that I'll use up most of my energy on the beginning of the piece, where a lot of decisions by now have been kind of muddled over, talked over, analyzed, and stretched in different ways, and everybody's incredibly familiar with that. The other is that I'm worried about using up all my energy. I can only spend about maybe 90 minutes on each of these longer entries in terms of like the time that it takes to edit and analyze and everything else. So I would rather start fresh at the end of each of these entries, and especially being able to talk about the impact of the ending here, and also the various big tutti sections from D. And then, finish up by looking over more familiar territory. So if that is cool with everybody, then let's start that out just by flipping back one page here to the beginning of E. So we'll talk about the way that the actual first bar of E starts when we look over D. All right, so I think it's good enough that you are holding over the horns here. So this is really exquisite. Like here you're reducing the, like going down to half double basses. So in a standard orchestra that might be only, say, 4. 4 double basses, maybe 5. And then here your contrabassoon is also playing along. I almost feel like there could be a little bit of balancing here, like maybe pianissimo contrabassoon and piano double basses, just because what is dovetailing off of this is the solo cello, right? So in the mock-up, it sounds absolutely gorgeous and perfect. In real life, I would be worried that there would be a heaviness of tone that would be difficult to have a nice dovetailing with in the cello, right? So I think contrabassoon is fine to just to give a little bit of color, a little bit more color to the double basses, but just I would even go pianissimo diminuendo at the end, right? All right, and then this, just beautifully rising through the registers of the orchestra, hanging on this B, and this is just so lovely the way that you work this out. Now, in my evaluation criteria, I talk about the voice standing alone, this upward reaching melody here, rising melody underlining solitude, absolutely. The upper part needing to back off. You keep everything pretty soft. You do have this sort of piano espressivo element to the English horn, and I, that absolutely, that is absolutely a part of how things are working in octaves with the solo cello. Just really a wonderful combination. And then clarinets, mid-range bassoon, flutes above, and first oboe, just really staying soft. Then the combination with the rolled chords in harp and celesta, keeping the celesta up, this beautiful little pattern playing out. I just really think you have set the mood here wonderfully, Anna. Sorry, I'm a little. Suddenly, I'm just a little congested. I don't know why. All right, and then a direct transcription in the trombones and the first trombone and first horn. That's really lovely. And the way the violins come in right on the end of it, going to this divisi and the rolled harp, it just works. Like all of this stuff works beautifully. And then clarinets and bassoons also working just really wonderfully. And I really appreciate how you, while keeping the same mood going, you change the context of the texture over and over again, from beautiful solo strings, adding on the winds above, English horn joining in the solo with the background winds and the celesta and harp, changing the melody note to the horns, and so this time strings as the harmony with a little bit more harp and a little ting on the triangle, and then just keeping it really serious and Russian sounding. Solo first, and I'm noticing that you're a little inconsistent about a few little things. Like here with the clarinet, like you want first clarinet here. You're setting up the first clarinetist to basically play most of the melodic content, where or just being more part of it on this screen. So here I realize that what you really want here is first on the bottom in this bar, right? So like if it were just a case of the first clarinet coming in and then playing the top note here, then this is of course fine, but like you don't really need to. I mean, if the what you really want, I think, is for the first to continue the bottom voice. So I think that you need to split the voices here. Now, if you just intended the first clarinet to jump up to the D, then get rid of this. Just have the marking of 1 here. Get rid of the second voice rest, right? Because it'll just be assumed. But I got the feeling that you want the first clarinetist to complete their line, ya da da dum, right, and then continue on mezzo piano below, right. And so with the second clarinet coming in pianissimo above, correct? All right. So just this the way that this is notated makes this confusing. And then this is lovely, the Doloroso. Kind of wondering whether this could be portato, right? With those tenuto marks, right? Just put a slur over them, and that way you just get the kind of more throbbing kind of a line. Yeah, and then just really lovely the combination of the strings and the winds here, and just little tings from the glockenspiel. Yeah, that's just so nice. And the rippling harp. There's beautiful rippling harp at the beginning as well. All right, now jumping to this next page. Yeah, so the kind of the reinterpretation of the ending of the prologue is also, like, once again you are shifting the tonal color in a very, very cool way. What is that? Okay, sorry, something weird was on my desk. And once again, very, very cool choices. Good that you're indicating like the swap back to the normal positions of first and second. That's all notated really nicely. Yeah. Yeah, it's just so great. Just, all reads right in here. Gives it that just really kind of a wonderful folk quality. And then coming in just first violins after the grand pause, the general pause. Yeah. And just those touches of chimes right in here and earlier in your orchestration, just so beautifully done. Yeah, it just really bodes well. Like that, this is the first that this is the first score out of this group. Just really kind of setting, you know, setting a level of what's possible. You dedicated this to the people of Ukraine. I mean, I think you should contact somebody and see, if you have any connections there, see if they would want to perform it. It's just very, it's practically pretty much ready for the stands. All right. Yeah, and then just a little push here with this kind of alternating harp, beautifully balanced in all parts. This time the ripples are in the celesta. Yeah, and then which it's wonderful the way that you manage this, doubling in clarinet and first violin, and then you back off in your first violin so that your clarinet protrudes, continuing on in a solo. That so it'll stand out against the strings. It's just really, really simple markings and very effective. However, if you are going to be playing piano when you get to here, do you really want your bass clarinet to be coming in at pianissimo? Shouldn't it also be piano? Right? See, because I just feel it would work better so that there's a more seamless handover, right? Yeah, and just really, just a lovely, lovely ending right in there. Alrighty, so a superb ending for one of these entries. Now let's back up a little bit to the beginning of D. There are just so many choice bits here. Some wonderful notation things. For instance, people wondering how they might glissando into a bar without actually completing, the glissando on the next downbeat. This is how to do it. Glissando to the grace note. Lovely. It's perfect. And I really love the way that this soft glissando sets up the downbeat here. I was mentioning this in a recent score about like there were a lot of very slow glissandos. In places where like the just the very soft brushing of the fingertips would work really well, and I kind of sense that here. It's not a very long span to go across these octaves here, just a span of 3 octaves. So there's it's at this tempo, especially with the ritardando molto. It's once again it's just going to be the fingertips lightly brushing over the strings rather than kind of a rip, which would be it would be more difficult at fortissimo to make it convincing without it really sounding like doing 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 up the strings, right? But with just the slight brushing of the fingertips is really what is going to happen here, and it'll just be so beautiful. All right, so I would say that your biggest challenges in the approach that you took here, Anna, is maintaining that sense of cascading downward with the in the octaves, which you set up here as just basically being in the celesta, and then it is fulfilled at the end with the cello. So this is just kind of an annoying thing, that happens at D, at the beginning of D, and that is connecting the cascading octaves, right? And here you kind of choose to not really do that, right? It's not a huge concern to you in your scoring. Okay, fair enough. But like, I mean, the problem here is, there's you are going up to mezzo piano crescendo, and you're adding more and more weight here, horns, trumpet, and so on, more middle register winds, and you are conscious, it seems, of the fact that that is really going to sort of start to drown out the harp and the celesta and so on. And so you've marked the harp up to fortissimo and the celesta up to triple F. So the problem here is that the harp is really never going to get any louder than about mezzo piano across the entire scope of the orchestral dynamic, right? So you could mark it forte, you could mark it fortissimo, you could mark it triple F, and it's still going to be mezzo piano sounding. So I would basically just you might as well just go crescendo to fortissimo. I think that the triple F is a little it's a dynamic that kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense to the celesta. I would say just kind of thinking in a craft perspective. Now, you might be, for all I know, you might be an orchestral keyboardist, and you might be thinking, oh, I get triple F in my parts all the time. I know that I can't really get anywhere with it, and that's why I've marked no louder than a mezzo piano crescendo for my orchestra parts. But right, I mean, that it's going to sound funky down there, right? Once you get below middle C, if that is true, and then even down on these Fs and so on is not going to really give you that kind of sound. So I mean, it's the kind of thing where, like, if you were really worried about what I'm saying here, you could easily just drop the glockenspiel part and have maybe these pitches played by the celesta, and then add like maybe a vibraphone part, right? That's an example of how you could bulk this up a little bit. But I wouldn't recommend messing around with it. I mean, I think that just changing just being a little bit more realistic, like I think fortissimo is quite loud enough. I think triple F isn't going to do anything for you. And forte is probably as loud as it's going to get anyway. But this is fine. Fortissimo in the harp, you just really are trying to make sure that these elements stand out, and that this isn't wasted. This solo violin part, and just coming in here over the top of the flute part and so on. It's just really a lovely idea here. And then the A2 flutes, A2 flutes come in here, playing in octaves with your second violin and violas. In addition to the trumpet and the A2 horns and so on. I mean, it just really is a lovely idea, and I just love the way that the harmonized melody is set up here in first flute, first horn at pianissimo, right? See, this makes sense, and bassoons. See, so this will all balance really nice, but I don't even think you need to go crescendo here in your horn part till maybe towards the end. I would just keep it, And also, if you intend this crescendo to last over 4 bars, I would say poco a poco crescendo, right? Because crescendo, I feel, is a term that really only... I mean, yeah, sure, it's really clear that you mean this to be poco a poco crescendo across 5 bars. All right, fair enough. But I mean, I just feel that like it's slightly less clear, like especially when you have a situation like this where where we don't have a destination dynamic for a long time, right? So I think it's better to say poco poco crescendo, right? And then the player is very, very clear that they aren't just doing the crescendo in the first bar or two. Okay? So yeah, that's just my feeling about the difference between just marking a crescendo and, which is less clear, and poco poco crescendo, which will maybe last several bars. Yeah, and continuing on, bassoons working in conjunction with the clarinets and the middle voice stuff, that's all really nicely done. Yeah, absolutely no issue there. But that's where the weight comes in, right? Especially with the horns teaming up like this. And really like exactly right here. Like the first and second horn working together, because that's just the first horn's partner, and there is nothing about this which is soaring or searching or searing high, that really requires the third horn player to team up with the first. So this is absolutely perfect. And then, of course, with the trumpet, first trumpet playing up there on this G sharp, that all works great. Okay, so just beautiful starts to D. Then on this next page, kind of continuing on with that, I love these little touches of bass clarinet right in here. And here you're kind of continuing on that sort of push into, like the glissando push into the next part. And it's a really wonderful way to just keep the glissando from becoming too noticeable, right? Like I've heard lots of overuse of glissando, and sometimes you can use glissando a lot in a way that is very refreshing and really stimulating to the music, but it can get overused, like in romantic gestures, sort of pointing to the downbeat, right? So it's good that you're kind of controlling that. Right, and then just all of the terms that you had in place, adding the English horn here, and then the harmony in the horns, joining together with the clarinets and bassoons and so on, all working together, and the trumpet on top. So it's just really, really nice scoring. But like the whole point here, though, is that like that I'm trying to make is the sacrifice that you made, and I'm sure you're aware of it, is that you lost the cascading, that sort of those cascading octaves going downwards. So normally I would say, well, you maybe don't need to worry about that so much. It's just because it's you scored it very, very beautifully without them. But right, that what happens right afterwards? We have the leaping octaves of the left hand transcribed here to our lower strings, and the honest truth is that like that the way that you've interpreted them is a bit understated, right? You have got a beautiful amount of harmony and harmonized melody and so on, and some nice these clanging chimes, and the timpani doing this punchy little part, rolls and punches and so on, and then this coming in here and just really aggressively stating the push into the next bar. Okay, see, that's all cool, but the kind of leaping quality of those octaves, I feel, starts to get a little lost, right? And you've already cut down on the cascading octaves here, right? So that is a possible thing where Barvinsky might like listen in on your rehearsal and raise his hand and say, "Where are my octaves?" Right? So is there anybody who could be doubling this to sort of bring it out a little bit more in a more graceful way? Is it possible that this bass clarinet part here could be played by one of your trombones, and then the bass clarinetist could be doubling the cellos in here to sort of bring out that line a little bit more solidly? Or maybe there's a way of doing it in the trombones that isn't so that doesn't require the trombonist to sort of leap all over the place, do 3-octave leaps and things like that. Maybe trading off between players in certain places. Okay, now one last thing I'm going to kind of comment on in terms of scoring before we go on to sort of analyze these 4 bars, which really stand on their own. And that is the fact that you stack 3 trombones onto one staff. I would say, even though vertical space is at a premium, I think you could have worked in a third staff, or a staff for the bass trombonist, and made it a dedicated bass trombone part. And just because these pitches here, I mean, it's a bass trombone part, not a tenor trombone part. So you might as well just say it, and you might as well have a separate staff for the bass trombone. All right, that just is a standard thing. That would be something I would say, if you do get this performed, change that, right? Or if you're going to start showing it around. which I highly recommend you do. Okay, so now this part in here was just beautiful. It really, really reminded me of Ravel, like just in the proportions of the way things were scored, and just in a really lovely way. And the like the piccolo above, and then the flutes right playing on top of that, and then oboe, English horn, and clarinet more in the range of the strings. It just has such a beautiful color. And then as I mentioned before, horns and so on, and clarinets and bassoons sort of working together, more middle voice harmonies and so on. So I felt that it just really had a wonderful, had a lot of guts to it, and just a real sincere quality to the harmonized melody. All right, so just really, really nice. And that, of course, like the chimes, that all worked great. So with LV, yeah, I mean, you could just leave an incomplete tie if you want to, just to kind of cut down on visual clutter, right? And then maybe say 2 bass drum. I usually put it in the next bar, but I mean, yeah, on the last rest that could also work. It's just that if you have the LV tie and so on. All right, so now we're getting into the nitty gritty agitato, which I think I mentioned in my score as what was it? Prestidigitato. No. As just very pressured, and yeah, I really love the fierceness here, right? You've got the solidity of your lower brass, lower strings, the contrabassoon, and so on, and you're giving your low players some time to breathe. I'm not sure that they need so many breaks. I think that the most tuba players and contrabassunists could play 4 bars of this before they needed a break, right? Before that, and bass trombonists, and certainly your string players do not need a break at all, right? So like, unless you really, really want to have this sense of like just boom, boom, kind of just the really, to really have them interrupted so that you can really land another punch on the downbeat. I mean, that's cool too. All right. However, I do have to point one thing out to you. You absolutely in no way are obligated to leave in these rests here, right? Because like in the piano part, you do not notice that there is this gap because of the melody notes, working together, bum bum. So maybe this gap here, right? But since the trumpets are just continuing churning along, and the the clarinets and the oboe, since they're all just blasting away, and you're also continuing on here with your strings, there's really kind of no obligation to leave this one in the middle unless you want to give some shape to, ba 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 ba, right? Which is something that I did. But there's zero need for you to leave a gap here. Just figure out what pitches should go in there, and I think that just has a sense of continuity. It's the same thing as remember I was talking about phrasis interruptus, right? In some of the other entries where people were just kind of perhaps over-interpreting the flow of the left-hand parts in the second half of the A section, where there were gaps where the pianist reached over to hit a middle voice note, right? So there's the same exact thing is happening here. I would just say, like, try not to leave too many gaps unless you are, like, maybe highlighting the melody and so on. Maybe you even don't need to do that so much. Now, here you've got this... Yeah, so I mean, basically, you're just saying you want long bows on this. Yeah. So it's sort of like it's a really different character than pop 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 pop. Right. So it's like each one of these is is a staccato and an accent, so it just really has an abrupt and punchy sound. Speaking of punching, but this is all like tenuto is long bows, right, without any other context. So it's just going to be zoom, 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 zoom. And I mean, do you really want that kind of difference between the two articulation styles? Because, like, I think it could possibly get you into trouble. And I'll point something out on the next page, but I don't want to jump there yet. Okay, so these are all cool. The crash and the cymbal, the tam tam, and then like just these thumps on like the fourth beat of the baton. It's all really great, and I love the like low winds working together with low strings and of course tuba and bass trombone, and this burst of energy here on the timpani. And keeping the repeated intervals nice and high, oboes, clarinets, and trumpet. I think that works great. There's you're really keeping it in just intervals of thirds and fourths. There's kind of no need. I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't add another pitch on, to sort of maybe fill in a little bit between these intervals. These could be triads of some kind if you wanted to, just to kind of avoid leaving a gap. And then, then here you've got like the melody, which is kind of our main concern, isn't it? So while it's kind of tracked by these kind of zooming tenuto upper strings and flutes on top, horns and and that's kind of, I mean, this is also a possible critique that could it be that that two flutes, two horns, and the entire string section may not be quite strong enough to hold down what's going on here. Could it possibly be that if you're going to just have your trumpets play in thirds and fourths and so on, perhaps the first trumpet could be playing along with the melody and just adding a little bit more weight on this line here, right? I just feel that the melody is slightly underpowered, and when you compare it to the ferocity and the depth of the bass line, right, just those long notes in each bar. Maybe maybe your flute needs a little bit more weight. Maybe the English horn could also be teaming up with the horns, right? Just feel that there needs to be a little bit more going on there. Okay, so this is what I worry about. Zoom, 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 and then just a sudden cut off. The thing about it is, I'm trying not to turn pages too much, but like there are no destination dynamics in these empty bars, right? So there really needs to be some kind of guidance here. If everybody is at fortissimo and they are going crescendo to nothing, then that's fine. But here you've got mezzo piano crescendo to forte. What is this going crescendo to, right? I just feel you need some sort of destination dynamics at the end here, even if it's just writing in triple F in all the wind and string parts, fortissimo in your heavy brass. I think that would all work great. Okay, all right. So, getting back to this, yeah. So there's no English horn part in here at all because you don't need it for your scoring. But just imagine if you just had a little bit more of that weight, like in the horn part, for instance, like doubling the horns there. Of course the horns are going to be way louder than the English horn, but it's just a matter of tone mass. There just needs to be a little bit more weight on the melody here. Flute, and then piccolo is coming in. This all works great. It's just really beautiful scoring. But yeah, I could just so much see a trumpet part in here, and I think you could make it work even with the the limitations of the amount of voices that you've got right now, spreading out some parts perhaps, and yeah, and then see, I mean, you got the melody there, right, already, da 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 dum, right. So there's no question that the first could take more of a melodic role, and then when you get to the diminuendo, just drop the English horn and the first trumpet. Yeah, if I said first horn back here, I meant first trumpet. Apologies. So yeah, and then just go to the roll that you've got here, and then bum 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 bum. Here's where I kind of almost wish that there was more weight playing along with those, like with with your horns here leading into this, because I don't know if they really have enough juice really to set this up, right? I mean, here's where I might maybe say, well, bring back in some players, add some players, maybe some winds like bass clarinet and bassoons doubling on this, English horn and oboes or clarinets, and then just dropping off, like just playing an eighth and then going into the da 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 kind of thing. Because I just feel there needs to be a little bit more weight here, and you can hear it in the mock-up. Not that the mock-up is necessarily always correct, but wow, you concocted a really gorgeous mock-up. Yeah, and here you can just see like the benefits of just how much better the scoring is when you don't have gaps like this, right? So just leave out the gaps. Just because the gaps are there to accommodate an octave played by the right hand for the pianist doesn't mean that you have to obey that and put the gaps in, right? Yeah, but oh, just so gorgeous, really, really nicely done. Yeah, and I just like the more I'm looking at them, the more I'm I mean, I could see the rationale. I'm not so sold on repeated notes here though. Da 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 dum. Dun, 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 but you keep going, yeah, da, da, yeah, da, da, yeah, 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 yeah. I don't know. Leave it in, see if it works. But yeah, maybe going to just a straight tremolo here might get more. You might get more push here out of the string sound. When you consider that you have to go up against accented heavy brass. Oh yeah, you just really desperately need a bass trombone staff here, throughout the entire piece, I would say. So yeah, so really wonderfully done D section, and like considering how much time I've spent on these two parts, I think I'm justifying the reorganization of how I'm evaluating these things. I'm going to continue to do this, unless there's like some of these are shorter or there is some other really important thing that happens at the beginning that sets things up that the rest of the evaluations need to happen in light of, right? And except for those cases, I'm going to be evaluating these with E first, then jumping back to D, and then jumping back to A through C. And in fact, why don't we do this now? Because there's kind of nothing more to say here. I just really love everything, the way that the percussion is being used here, and the division of the parts right in here. But once again, I just really feel that the melody needs to be a bit stronger, just a little bit more. Even if it's just adding English horn here and first trumpet to this line here in I mean, especially if you're going to jump way up here with the flute and so on. So yeah, I just think there needs to be just a little bit more weight in the middle of that quadruple octave. Now back to the first screen here. Just a few comments here. Right here you say oboe 3 to English horn. What you really need is in your English horn part, you mark it English horn, and then underneath this this name here you have in parentheses oboe 3, right? Then you don't need to put this in here. So we just know English horn is starting. Until we know that there's an oboe 3 part, we're not going to worry about it. Okay? So that would be the way to deal with that. And then once again, trombone 3 should be its own bass trombone staff. All right. So I didn't see any other problems. Just kind of as a comment, I'm noticing a lot of these entries that I'm getting are sort of foreshortened, right? Maybe the settings are not coming through of 747 by 420. It just sort of helps on the readability of the score. Maybe if you do that, you can bring up like the font size, bring up the size of your staves a little bit too, and then that all just makes everything more readable and easier for me to flick from page to page without having to go into the editing and like reformat every time I change the screen. Okay, but other than that, wow, just what a great ending, beginning. So I really love like how you've got the like oboe here, clarinets, and bassoon, right? And then you echo that color later on when we get to C with English horn, clarinets, and bass clarinet. It's just as a wonderful callback. So, of course, every section of this piece has got its own criteria screens. uh, and I feel you really do the job beautifully well here in addressing some of my concerns. Like, for instance, an emotional and timbral progression. We see that beautifully here. So, just starting out with those instruments that I named, just very beautifully and simply stated. Sort of like that last compilation I that I just released today as I'm recording this, yesterday as you'll be watching this. And then bringing in English horn, bass clarinet, and so on, and just kind of adding more, just a little bit more weight, a little bit more texture in there, and then easing off, and so beautifully back to the original color. Just really, really nicely done. It's gentle push from pianissimo to mezzo forte and so on. It all works so great. And then here, really taming the horns, keeping the horns in the background while your this little trio of your flutes and English horn work together, and then just so gently, so beautifully handing over the color to the middle winds right in here from the horns. Just so great, and just such nice scoring on it. And like looking at it, like I do not see any big problems, like some of the problems that have just sort of entered into a lot of scores, like in things like piano style slurs just dropped into parts, slurring over the repeated notes. So like, just notice, folks, like go back and listen to the mock-up at how clear these dotted rhythms are, because they're not slurred over. Da ta ta, right? It really, because they're articulated in the winds. They just have much more punctuation. They just the power. And then like here, like this isn't slurred over as well. Now, just one kind of comment is that you're choosing to slur into the downbeat in a lot of places, but not everywhere. So I'll give you a pass on that. Slurring across the strong beat in the middle, slurring across the downbeat, it's okay. I mean, it could get to be a little affected after a while, but it's only for the intro. You don't do it habitually throughout the entire piece, so it has my approval. And then going on to here, about my only comment is I just sort of wonder if there could be a little bit more smoothness. Do you know what I mean? What if this pitch were E instead of C, right? So in other words, an F sharp for your bass clarinetist, and an E for the right, and the same thing here, E in the viola. So you're not going, there aren't too many repeated notes. Otherwise you go, D, 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 and then jump up here, and then you have C, C, right? So just like for more of a flow, just kind of avoiding repeated notes as much as possible. And the E is in the note of the upper note of your divisi second violins and so on. But yeah, just like the more flowing you can get this to work across all of the parts, the better, right? And I love the dovetailing, the way that it is all worked out. And I think that it would make a really smooth combination. It's a little fiddly in the way that it looks on the page, but I think that like so long as the players rehearsed it and they got used to the way that it all worked together, I think that it would work fine. Yeah, it's perfectly fine to add or leave out destination dynamics here, like the piano for the like leaving piano at the end of this hairpin, leaving mezzo piano at the end here, and then here, like just to be clearer, right? If this is mezzo piano, this should be mezzo piano, crescendo to mezzo piano in the violas. That's something I would probably do. Just to really make sure that everybody really synchronized exactly the same dynamic across all the parts. But yeah, one thing to think about here and in the one part of the of E, like if you have highly nuanced parts above and you're holding your horns back a little bit, experiment with just like not having very many nuances in the background horns. Like if you go back and look at my orchestration, you'll notice that like I'll have a passage where the horns are providing some background harmony, and the winds are getting all of the nuances, and the horns are just really kind of giving color to everything without really pushing and pulling along with everybody else, right? Maybe change around the mock-up, listen to it, see what you think, all right? Maybe just only push when you get to here, that kind of thing. Alrighty, so yeah, starting off with the melodic content, just kind of almost a standard octave in the violins and thirds in the second violins, and then glockenspiel coming in here when you add flute and so on. Yeah, just you have a really beautiful flute sound in your mock-up, by the way. Just it has that wonderful edgy quality, especially in the middle register. And then this opens out so beautifully. I really love the idea of the harp just rippling rather than imitating, sort of slavishly imitating the exact flow of the left hand. Yeah, I mean, just adding, you're adding more context, more color, and then you have this sort of back and forth glissando. That's also wonderful. A good way to notate that. Although I would have added just to be absolutely sure, might not be a bad thing to add just a pedal diagram here. Some people, some harpists would say, "Oh, you don't need one at all because I can see that this is all sort of together." And then another harpist would say, "It would really be helpful to see that I didn't have to change any of my pedals here." It's like, you get the opposite suggestions from two different harpists. So I would say, if the worst complaint somebody would say is that I probably don't need that, then I would say leave it in for the people who might need it, right? And usually that you won't get any complaints. I mean, unless you add all of the pedaling for all of the harpists don't like that. All right, yeah, and just really wonderful handling of the octave melody and the middle voices and the flow of the patterns into the middle voice, just really masterfully done, Anna. So nicely, and then just the increase of information until finally you've got a softer piccolo on top. Well, a little bit of a forte there on that high C, but it's more. It's just more integrated into the texture. Beautifully done, and then the horn coming in here, that is going to join in the figuration. This is something that I will discuss. A little bit of push with the timpani. It's setting everything up for this next part here. Just you really have a joyous sound in here. Ba ba ba. It just really is nice. So I am not philosophically against the horns playing flowing patterns, even though that's not incredibly much in their character. What I'm a little more worried about are the way that you slur things in both the cellos and the horns. right? I just feel that it's a little choppy, especially in this bar here. What if you just had, I don't know, you have an emphasis here on this C. I'm not sure why it needs to be there, right? And you're slurring from that second note. What if you had a slur across half the bar here, and then a slur across the next half of the bar for the cellos, and then same thing here, slur there, slur there. Yeah, I'm just not totally in love with this. And then slur across this half of the bar, slur across this half of the bar, or divide this into two beam groups. Okay. Now, meanwhile, in our horns, I would say try to do as much of the cello as you possibly can in second horn, and then dovetail on this note to first horn, right? Because I think it's just better to have just a constant flow with just almost no sense of interruption, or I think the more that I think horns are great. It's a interesting, unique idea, but the more that you divide it up like this, the choppier it's going to sound, right? So just make the slurs longer, and then with the horn, just slur right into the dovetailing note, so that it's just one long stream of breath. Okay, so yeah, just dovetail. You don't need two horns, especially if you're going down to mezzo piano and so on. And so I think it's better to split it up into just one horn trading off to the other horn, and then the same thing here. And I like the way you're going back and forth between the horns. It certainly makes things interesting and so on. Yeah, and then once again you have this sort of dropping at the end, and that gives some space for the middle voices, melodic arc, and so on. Yeah, just basically no problems here with the clarinets and the flutes and so on. Yeah, so that all works for me. I like the tuba working with the double basses and the contrabassoon and so on and so forth. It can get to be a little weighty though, so just you might not even need tuba here at all, or it could be even softer than it is in terms of the mix. Now here, people might be saying, well, why don't you tell Anna to play down, to play back one one dynamic level in the horns and so on. Well, the trombone is perfectly fine with this mezzo forte, but because of the character of the music here and the way things kind of stay out of each other's way, especially if you divide this into trading off partners, then there's absolutely no need for the horns to be scored under, right? Just because of the way everything stays out of everything else's way. All right. And then, we get to this beautiful searching, and you make it so simple, right? Where me and some other orchestrators just very kind of much tortured ourselves with calculations of how to get it to be absolutely perfectly smooth. You just went for a cadenza with the harp, and I think that is just as valid. I put the slur over the entire thing, just going all the way from this note to that note, right? And then the same thing here, slur all the way from to there, because this doesn't really mean anything to the harpist, right? It just slur across the entire thing. All right, and then good trade-off, glockenspiel note going to oboe, and then the clarinet solo kind of taking over and doing this wandering thing downwards. I really just love the really bland, murky kind of texture here with all of the lower winds. Just it has that quality is like nothing else, especially in the voicing that you've got it. All right. Yeah, and then we're back to what I mentioned before, a version of what happened before. I think with the clarinets in the middle, and then English horn on top, and bass clarinet below instead of bassoon. It just really has a wonderful callback to the beginning, and especially with just that lovely oboe there. I mean, you could nuance this a little bit but a lot of it's pretty obvious. My only concern here is just that the these restless octaves in here are so soft. They're soft in the mock-up. They are soft in my inner ear. And like here you're adding this tuba note in order to sort of stabilize it and sort of imitate the sound of a sustained low bass note, right? Okay, so that's all great. But what is it doing in the end with such a soft touch in interpreting these restless octaves is that it is obscuring the octaves. Very, very cool chimes right in here. And then like when we get to this next page here, kind of similar problems. This is the character of this section is the restlessness within the placidity, right? So like if we don't have the restlessness, then we lose the context of the trade-off to here, and then this can feel too bland. I'm not saying that it does in your orchestration, but like that's the point of the restlessness in here is to provide an emotional contrast with what is to come, right? With the cascading octaves. So, I mean, is there a way of reinterpreting this that would make it even better? I don't know. You'd have to sort of think about it. Maybe these notes should be more like piano than pianissimo. That might be just an easy fix. I love the way that this trades off from that original quartet to back to oboe, bassoons, violins coming in, and trombone and so on. I just feel it's a really beautiful combination. Yeah. Just to check something really quickly. Right. All right. So just what a lovely orchestration and what a great entry and a great way to start this massive deluge of of the last few scores, the last 42 scores in the 2022 Orchestration Challenge. So anyway, stay posted for more. There's going to be more releases today and tomorrow, and just really a lot of action happening, and our grand finale coming up in, well before Christmas. I'll find a date where everybody can really participate, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, everybody. So really enjoying this. Great way to start. Thank you so much, Anna, for your for supporting the channel and for helping me support some musicians there in the Ukraine. It really makes a huge difference, and it's I'm sure that our assistance is helping somebody out there. And thanks to everybody out there who is watching all the way to this point in the video. You guys are real troopers. And look, Anna has made so many helpful comments on so many videos, and obviously she knows her stuff and is has a lot of information to share and good feedback. So please, like if Anna said something cool about your score and gave you some good advice, just give her whatever you can back, even if it's just saying that how much you liked their entry, or you liked her entry, or if you have a little bit of advice about one or two problems that she was facing in the score, or not that there appears to have been too many of those. Just add it below, please. That really helps the conversation and keeps things going, and I'm sure will be appreciated. All right, everybody, stay tuned because another score is coming your way really, really soon today.